Hello again, everybody. I'm Dean O'Neill.
And I'm Nick Robinson.
Nick, we are on episode 2.
Episode 2
of On the Ground.
This was a big day on the trip.
Right.
Yeah,
At the border.
Yeah, because this is the day we actually crossed the border that we were there to see.
Sure.
Getting ready for this trip, this was probably the part that made me the most nervous.
Right.
I have crossed the U.S.-Mexico border on foot once before, and I've crossed the U.S.-Canadian border once or twice on foot before.
Really?
I crossed the U.S.-Mexico border on foot when I was a 21-year-old kid. I'll say I was there. I'd traveled to Los Angeles with a friend whose dad was working there, and we stayed in his dad's apartment. And we said, let's go to San Diego. So we drove down to San Diego. I'm like, hey, let's go to Mexico. Let's walk across the border, find just like a little tourist trap restaurant,
right,
and then come right back.
Right.
And that experience was really interesting. It was very easy to cross into Mexico on that trip. And we got a taxi driver because when you cross the border in these kind of places, there are a bunch of people with taxis trying to take us somewhere. They took us somewhere. And we walked down the street. And on that street, I have never had people offer to sell me as many different illegal things as on that day. They offered to sell me anything you can think of pretty much.
Wow.
And I was like, that is not what I want.
So did you go across with a passport, or did you just
No, it was before you had to have a passport. It was before the passports were required. I had to have a driver's license.
Wow.
And so then we were like, okay, this is not for us. We got back in a different cab and went back to the border, and we stood in a long line to come across the border. And, they ask you some questions as you're going across, and then we drove back to Los Angeles. And then when I crossed the Canadian border, I was doing an internship at SUNY Buffalo, State University of New York, Buffalo. And we crossed over into Canada before you needed passports to do that kind of thing, just to hang out over there. And it was similar but different. Easy to walk across, a little harder to walk back. They had some questions for us, wanted to see who we were and why we were doing what we were doing. And so this time I was a little nervous because we had several people tell us, maybe you all shouldn't do that. I'm worried about your safety.
Right.
And when we got even people that we talked to from the area, there's a lady that I talked to from a United Methodist Church down there, and she's like, "Where are you crossing?" "Oh, I wouldn't do that if I was you. You guys probably shouldn't do that." So several people that were familiar and unfamiliar with the area were like, "You should not do that."
Right. Okay.
I was a little nervous, but not incredibly nervous because I knew that we had done this before, and I knew that we were going with a guide.
Right.
We met somebody on the United States border, Pastor Jerry was his name, who speaks Spanish. He is Anglo, I believe, and he was going to help us cross, and then we were going to meet someone on the other side named Pastor Adri, and he was going to be our guide in Mexico. And they had our trip planned. If they felt that it was dangerous, they would have canceled it. But they told us a few things. As part of kind of a briefing for the morning, we talked about the demographics of the Rio Grande Valley and McAllen. And McAllen is 86% Hispanic or Latino now. As of 2020, it's estimated to be 86.67% Latino. And you get there and you really do see almost everybody is Latino or Hispanic
in McAllen.
On the U.S. side of this.
Yes.
Like for instance, we went to a Mexican restaurant the first night that we were there to eat some food, a pretty nice place, and everyone besides us in the building were Latino or Hispanic. And in Indiana, if you see that, you're like, oh, this must be a good Mexican restaurant because we're the only white people here.
Right.
But in McAllen, that's just true about every restaurant. You go to McDonald's, you go to the steakhouse, you go wherever, and that's kind of the demographic that is present.
Now, the Mexican cuisine that you ate in McAllen, was it different than what's in Indiana?
Yeah, I had shrimp tacos. They were pretty good. They were in corn tortillas. They had one of the big differences is the way that they served salsa. There would be like 3 different salsas and little plates with spoons and chips. Then one person ordered octopus, but it was just lots of food, good food.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. And, we talked about poverty levels, but we also talked about like how in McAllen, if you go to Wikipedia and you look at who the local governors are, like the mayor and the city council, again, they're all Latino. It's just in Indiana, so often our experience with immigrants of any kind, Columbus is an exception to this in some ways, but it's often people who are day laborers of some kind. And in Columbus, we also have people working for Cummins and Toyota and places that.
Sure.
But in McAllen, it's just everybody is Latino or Hispanic, and everything that's done is by people who are Latino and Hispanic.
Sure.
There you have this whole wide swath of life. As part of this kind of demographics briefing, we also were told, Pastor Jerry is like, while you're there, do not talk about the cartels. Do not ask anybody about the cartels. The cartels will know that you are there, but they don't usually bother pastors. So we'll all be in a group together. So don't worry, but don't ask anybody because nobody's going to want to say anything because they never know who's listening. So don't talk about it. They'll know you're there, but you'll be safe as long as you just stay together, like stay in pairs. Don't do anything dumb, and you'll be fine. And yeah, I felt safe the whole time I was there.
Okay. Now, when they say they don't bother pastors, I mean, it's not like you had a big tag on saying I'm a pastor.
I didn't have a collar on.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
But we were with a pastor
that had a.
Well, and he didn't have a collar on, but people know him.
Knew him. Okay, gotcha.
The pastor that we went with, that we were meeting on the other side, is a pastor who's been doing for years work with migrants living in Mexico, largely people who were coming to Reynosa to try to cross the border to get into the United States. So people who were Guatemalan, people from El Salvador, people from Haiti, people from China, people from all over the world, like a diversity of places in the world at least, trying to cross over into the United States. And it got really busy in Reynosa for a while. And so Pastor Adri was like, I need to do something. And so he went down there and helped people, gave them, here's some tamales for dinner or tacos or whatever for dinner, like Mexican food for dinner for the people who are hungry and don't have anything because they've migrated. And it's very dangerous to be a migrant because it costs a lot of money to migrate. $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, $40,000 you can pay to somebody to help you travel from wherever you are to the United States border. And the cartels and different people know that. And so you are at risk of being kidnapped because they know that you have access to money. It may not be on your person, but somebody somewhere has money to help pay for your trip. And so you're in danger of living in subpar conditions while you're in this process, but also everyone is looking to take advantage of you because you're temporary, but also because you have access to some kind of resources to try to make this trip. Maybe because someone worked in the United States, right, and is sending money back to you. So it's a very risky proposition to be a migrant. But so Pastor Adri started responding to people and addressing needs, and eventually just more and more and more people are coming. And so the effort to address needs grows increasingly sophisticated and resourced.
So just to be clear, you're prefacing everything before you actually went into Reynosa, or are you there now? I mean, you had lunch and
some of this we learned
McAllen.
As we're getting over. So we didn't have lunch. We had our debrief. Then we went to the border and we parked in a parking lot, like kind of a dirt parking lot, and we were right by the border wall.
Wow,
the border wall that was famous for, it was in the news and people were fighting about it for so long. And what we did was we walked up to the border wall and took a picture of the group up there. And Pastor Jerry was like, "Now it's not illegal to be by the wall, but if Border Patrol sees us by the wall, they're going to tell us to move. So let's be quick about this, going up to see it and taking our picture up there and everything." So we did that. We went up there, took a picture, and then we came. It was up on a hill, so we came down the hill and we just walked across the border. There were a few National Guard people from United States National Guard at the border, and kind of, what are you guys up to? This is what we're doing. Okay. I mean, they looked fresh faced. They they were just hanging out. And we walked, and you walk across this bridge, And on this bridge, there's green fencing, like a chain link fence on one side. So if you can't jump into the water or anything off this bridge. And then on the other side, there's barricades, even things with like razor wire on them.
Just getting ready to ask, can you,
and it almost looks like the razor wire and the cement walls weren't blocking anything. They almost look like they're there in case someone needs to turn them to shut the bridge down. Is almost what it looks like.
Right.
I don't know that per se, but we walked
Were you
across.
crossing a river?
So you cross the Rio Grande.
Yeah.
And at this point in Mexico, or on the border, the Rio Grande has water in it.
Right.
It's a river that maybe looks like the rivers in Columbus in size at this place.
Sure.
If you go further,
Definitely crossable.
you could swim it probably.
Swim it, and
Can't walk across it.
No.
But if you go further west, it's a trickle, and you can just like kind of walk across it.
Yeah.
If you go further east, eventually you come to a dam, and that's why this section of the river has water. And so we'll get to that story on another day because we actually take a boat ride on the river.
It's like the old wives' tale of the Mississippi. At one point, you could just step over it, and
And there are some places you can about step over the Mississippi if you go
yeah.
far enough north and west.
Sure. So okay. So you're getting ready to cross, or you've crossed in.
So we're crossing over. We talk to the American National Guard people. We go over, and you go through an area where there are now Mexican guards, and again, people have visible weapons that they're holding, which is always in. I remember the first time I saw that. I think I was in Germany. Actually, I was in an airport in Germany. I'm like, they have like submachine guns and stuff standing there guarding this airport, and like that's as you walk into Mexico, there are people with guns, and then there's like a machine to scan your bag to see if you're taking anything into the country or whatever. So you get scanned real quick, but not necessarily real thoroughly. And you walk across, and you end up in this kind of little square area, this little plaza that outside of the border crossing area.
Right.
As it's paved.
Not quite into Reynosa yet.
Yeah, you're in Reynosa now. You're in
Okay,
Reynosa.
gotcha.
You've crossed the border. You've clicked all. You've cleared all the checks, and now you are in this square. And there's people around. Some people just going about their daily lives. Some taxi drivers around. Some people selling little chiclets or whatever for money.
Right.
Kids standing around. They're just people around. Right. There's a busy road out front. And we stood in this plaza for a little while. And they're like, when we get over there, we're just going to go straight to the vans, just so there's no problems. Mm-hmm. So we stood in a group for a little bit while everybody finished crossing. And then we went straight to the vans and got in 2 vans. And they drove us to a church. And we went to the one room of the church that's air conditioned, I think. This is not the church of the pastor that we were there with. It was a friend of his. They let us use the room that was air conditioning because we're soft Americans. And it was 90 degrees outside and humid. And in that room, while we were there, the pastor told us some of his story. Some of this, there were all these migrants, and we needed to people were hungry. So we started feeding people, and people needed clothes, and we started giving people clothes. And it kind of went from there and there. And, I connected people to resources. And then eventually on that square that we had walked in that was busy, but not overly crowded when we crossed over a year ago, that place was full of people. There were thousands of people in that area waiting to cross over. And Pastor Adri was also kind of in charge of a couple different migrant camps. So
before we get into the migrant camps, because that is a pivotal point, I think
it is.
That people are gonna just really have an aha moment here in just a second. A couple of questions.
Yeah.
Did you feel some culture shock when before you went to the church? Did you feel some culture shock?
Yeah, there's kind of stages of culture shock, I'd say. Like you get into San Antonio and it feels like Texas versus Indiana. And so there's a little culture shock.
Right.
And it's a big city versus Columbus.
Right.
And then you get into McAllen. And in some ways, to me, McAllen feels like a well-to-do suburb of Mexico almost. There's a lot of Spanish being spoken.
If you've made it to McAllen, you've made a step up.
Yeah. And it feels like they call it like a borderland. And so like it's just a different kind of place than the rest of Texas. And then you go into Reynosa, and Reynosa feels like you're in a foreign country. Immediately it feels like I'm in Mexico. It felt a little bit like Guatemala when I had gone to Guatemala before.
Sure.
It's buildings are made out of cement more often. The signage is different. The roads are narrower and smaller. The cars are different brands than you would recognize in the United States by and large. I even forget what the brand of the bus or the van that we were in, but it was not a brand that you would drive in the United States. And so everything is just different. I was sweating at least slightly the whole time I was there because everything was just a little warmer, less air conditioning, all those kinds of things. You automatically have that culture shock that things are different. And, oh, by the way, I don't speak the language where I am.
Right.
Because I don't speak any Spanish.
So right off the bat, you're a foreign person in a foreign world.
Yeah. And feeling a little uncomfortable and staying close to my guides.
Exactly.
Not necessarily afraid, but like, I don't know what I'm doing here, so I should stay close to the person who does know what they're doing.
Was there a third world feel?
Oh, I mean, a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, definitely things were not as nice. In some way, so there were people, begging for money nearby.
Mm-hmm. Impoverished.
Impoverished. And you would see some of that in bigger cities. Later on during this day, we drove by some places that were, it seemed like camps where people were hanging out and had built substandard housing for them to live in. Those big round spools that like electrical wire and things come on, and people had taken those, cut them apart, and turned them into fences and things like that. So some things were obviously repurposed. Things weren't as nice as in the United States. So it had a very different feel right away.
And not to take light anything, but this is not a tourist place of tourism.
It is not. Again, as I said, like a lot of people who even lived in McAllen of various backgrounds were like, well, I would not go there.
Right. Right.
There's a place up the road called Progressa. Mm-hmm. And there's and that's a little more tourist friendly area.
Gotcha.
In Reynosa, to me, I saw a lot of dentist's office. I'm like, I wonder why there's so many dentist's office. Like if there's some medical tourism, or like people coming over to have their dental work done that they can't afford in the United States, or like I had those kind of things came to my mind. I don't know for sure. I heard people mostly go to Progresso for that kind of stuff, not in Reynosa, but you just. Again, like in San Antonio, your ears get perked up for this story. Mm-hmm. You're in this, and what is strange to me because it's not where I'm from, right?
Sure.
I'm a stranger in this place, and so I'm hyper aware of everything that's going on around me.
Right.
And by and large, the people who live there look comfortable. They're walking around, doing their thing, and
because they don't know anything else, but they just know of their region, so they are.
It's not strange to them.
It's not strange
to them.
Yeah.
And. So we get in these vans and we drive off to. Do you have another question before I go to the church?
Okay, good. Thank you.
And so we go to this church, and Pastor Adri has organized a few people to kind of tell us their stories. First, he tells us about his experience of working in the migrant camps and helping helping the people in the migrant camps and doing some immigration work with them, and basic and feeding ministries and housing ministries and things like that. Things that. Honestly, to me, look very familiar as someone who's done ministry with people experiencing homelessness or ministry with people experiencing poverty. It's very recognizable forms of ministry. And so he told us about his desire to help people and how God got a hold of him and put him to doing this work, and how people thought, he shouldn't be doing it, or all the kind of the things that he faced in doing it. And then he started introducing us to some of the people who were with him. There was a guy who had originally left Guatemala to immigrate to the United States, and he got to Reynosa, and he got to know Pastor Adri, and he decided that what he needed to do was stay in Mexico and minister to the migrants. So he switched from a migrant trying to reach the United States to someone who was content to live in Mexico and was going to spend his life, and his wife was going to join him in doing this, his wife's life in serving migrants and living out his faith there. And it felt like a call from God to him to go. And so earlier today we recorded a podcast, There's No Gift Too Small. And sometimes we think of certain categories of people that might not have a lot of gifts to give. And so here's someone who is a migrant who had so little and decides to, I do have something to give. I have my life to give. I have the greatest thing imaginable to give, and I'm going to spend it in serving people.
Now, can I ask one more
go
one
for
other
it.
question when we as we go? Pastor Jerry, was his did he or somebody like him, were their goals to get the migrant over to the United States? Is
No.
that the
No, so
end game?
Pastor Jerry, Pastor Adri, all of the pastors doing ministry and the people doing ministry in these settings, none of them were setting agendas for other people's lives.
Perfect.
They were always, what is your need? How can I help you?
Gotcha.
So other
Gotcha.
people are setting the agenda for their lives, and all of the people doing ministry are coming alongside them.
Gotcha.
So they weren't like, I'm going to recruit as many people to get into the United States as possible
Sure.
or anything like that.
Sure. Okay.
So then the next couple or group of people that Pastor Adri introduced us to was a group of people, family from Haiti. A lot of people had left Haiti to seek asylum in the United States, to seek safety and a better life after, read the news about Haiti.
Sure.
Lots of different reasons.
I've been to
why
Haiti,
people-
so yeah.
Lots of different reasons people were seeking that new life, that fresh start. And the first person who talked spoke in Spanish. And so several of these people we had to listen to through interpreters. So Joseph, I believe, was this guy's name, and he was a doctor. He had trained in the Dominican Republic to be a physician, and was also now migrating because of the things that were going on. And he's just talking about how this ministry had been really important to him, and how he's trying to get to America to better his life. And then he introduced us to, I believe it was his sister-in-law or someone like that, and she had been in Mexico pregnant. And there was a high risk thing going on, and she was going to be brought into the United States to deliver this high risk baby. She was 8 or 9 months pregnant,
Sure.
And she ended up being, I think, admitted to the hospital or something in Mexico instead, and so she had a baby in Mexico instead of the United States. And I think we're familiar with it.
Right?
There are implications to that,
yes,
right?
Yes. No.
Like if you deliver a baby in the United
Right,
States, that
right.
baby is an American citizen.
Exactly.
If you deliver a baby in Mexico, that baby is a Mexican
Exactly.
citizen. And Pastor Adri just found, he tried to comfort her because she was upset about that. She
Sure.
wanted to have a baby in the United States, and he comforted her and said, it's okay. Mexicans are good too. Mexican
Right,
babies are
right,
good.
right.
You can have a great life in Mexico.
Right, right.
And one of the things that I won't forget from Pastor Adri was he talked about how for some people the United States becomes an idol. Like they want to get to the United States because it will change their fortunes. It will change their lives. And he's preaching to them like, the person that you are here is the same person that you're going to be there. Like if you're not happy here, or if you don't follow the rules here, if you aren't living a good life in Mexico or in Guatemala or El Salvador or Haiti, you're not going to be able to flip that switch in the United States. The United States is not going to magically fix all of
Sure.
your problem. And so it was really interesting to me how he preached to people not to put your hope in the United States, but to put your hope in God, which I think is a powerful message to people immigrating, but also to Americans, to U.S. citizens who have lived here their whole lives. Like our country is not going to save us. God saves us.
Sure.
So Joseph talked, and then his sister-in-law talked, and the kid was there. And
Right.
was like,
Oh, that's good.
was fairly old. Was walking around and stuff at
Right,
this
right,
point.
yeah.
And was wonderful to see a kid. But these individuals were living in the migrant camp that we were going to go see after lunch. And when the woman was talking, there was this really interesting moment that took place because the woman would speak in Creole, and then the doctor would translate to Spanish, and then someone else would translate. Pastor Jerry would translate from Spanish to English. So it was like a 3-person chain
Wow.
before we could understand. Most of us could understand what was being said. Most of the pastors, and so it was again one of those places where whose story is being told. How hard is it to tell the story?
Sure.
How hard is it to hear the story? And what are all the details? And so it was powerful to hear the stories and experiences of these migrants, why they were migrating, what they were hoping for, largely always a better life. They wanted to get into the United States and work hard and provide a life for their families.
Interesting.
Experience that kind of stability that maybe some of us have and take for granted in the United States.
Well, let's get to the point to where we talked about, because I think this is to me, when we talked about this, is one of the moments that you had to think, wow.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the population of the immigrant camp now versus a year ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah. So we eventually leave this church and we go have lunch at basically a Mexican restaurant chain in Reynosa, and I see a Catholic church. We walk up and down a shopping street and see all that, and then we go to a migrant camp. And so this migrant camp, it was funded by UNICEF. You could see signs of these funding organizations.
Sure.
There was this large steel roof with all of these. They look like sheds almost, and like. But when we get to this camp, it's almost empty.
Now, let's be clear. This camp is camp of people that want to get to the United States that haven't got there yet, and this is a camp.
Yeah, and so there are 40 people living in this camp.
Sure.
A year ago, there were 2,000 people living in this camp. There were 2 families per shed that they were living in, and now you walk down the rows of sheds, and they are almost all entirely empty.
Sure. And so I will say this, and so because we want to keep it, this is what you saw.
This is what I saw.
Okay. So there's reports there's been reports on the news in the past 6 months and in this administration and everything that said that there's no border problem now. It's zero. It's zero. This is the first, and all I hear is what I hear, This is the first time I have, and ladies and gentlemen who's listening at home, that we hear it from an eyewitness. 2,000 to 40.
Yeah.
And so, real quick, obviously, whatever is going on in the United States to do something about the immigration, I'm not saying is working. I'm just saying you can tell something's going on because of the pure population decrease.
And so while we were there, we didn't talk a lot about policies.
Good. Yes.
But people did largely acknowledge 3 different things about the policies of the United States and how that has affected immigration. One is we talked to some people who had been ministering to people migrating for decades, and they say policies always change. There are different presidents. There are different Congresses.
Sure.
The rules change ever so often.
Right.
During the Biden administration, there was an app called the CBP One app.
Right.
And it was a tool that allowed people to start a documentation process.
Sure.
And you could get an appointment, you could cross over, and then largely people were going into the rest of the country where they had family.
Right.
And so people in this area, in Reynosa and McAllen, say, there were thousands of people crossing every day the border, using this app, going through this process. And there were just a lot of people in Reynosa waiting to come across the border, a lot of people in McAllen and the area crossing over, and then figuring out how to go join their family. So a lot of them were not staying in this area for a long time.
Right.
They would go to a kind of a migrant center, which we visited one day, so we'll talk about that later. But they're very short term as they were going to other places in the country. And then people will say, in January, it all changed.
Right.
So that's the third thing that people talk about when the policies of the United States while we were there. In January, it stopped.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And let's be clear again. Things changed, and there were this many people, and then it went down to this many people, which means, like you said, in January everything changed.
And in this, I don't believe the CBP One app works anymore. So that's one of the changes. People can't make their appointment to come in the United States, and these are people that were doing it in a way that was legal at the time.
Sure.
And now that way is closed, and so the people who are crossing a lot of them are not interested in crossing in an undocumented way because of all of the limitations that puts on your life. So these were thousands of people crossing in a way that was documented by the administration at the time.
Right.
Things have changed, and enforcement, and people are not crossing because there's fewer ways to cross.
Sure.
Enforcement, I think, is higher,
Yes.
and that deters people.
Right.
And so you don't have these thousands of people crossing a day. Some people will say good. Some people will say bad.
Right.
Our response to that change can vary legitimately so.
Sure.
And we can have different opinions. one of the things that I wonder as a result of this is because in Reynosa and in McAllen, things seem calmer, right? You can imagine the chaos that comes with thousands of people crossing the border a day who maybe don't speak English and are trying desperately to get to their families and have been traveling for months to get to this place. And they don't have reason. You can just imagine the chaos.
Right.
And right now, that chaos is not there, which seems like a good thing.
Right.
The other thing is, as we think about storytellers from our podcast yesterday that we recorded from day one, was we don't know the stories of the people now.
Right.
Like we kind of know some details of the migrants coming through the border and how many people there were and some of the chaos and the stresses that were put on the system because of that. And some of the stresses that maybe people felt in the United States or the joy people felt in the United States because of that. And the story, even if we didn't know all the details, was in front of us. And right now, with migrants not coming to the border, we don't know the stories.
Right.
And again, I'm not making policy.
No, not at all.
Anything at all. I'm just saying there's this peacefulness, but we also don't know all of the stories.
Sure.
And that leads me to asking more questions.
Perfect. And let me say this too. There was chaos at Ellis Island when there was chaos, but it was a more organized chaos. I mean, the people that came in were documented and everything, such as it was, and that's what happened. So, I get it, and just let me say that I think that this is a good place to stop because we can all. Your storytelling got to a point to where it's like, okay, everybody, the immigration situation in the United States was up there because of this app that was done. Nothing wrong with it. It was just a policy, a different administration, and then they got rid of the app, and it came down. Yeah. Along with some other things, but it came down.
Yeah, and immigration is something that we need to talk about. There's a lot of details, and so hopefully these stories can help people think through some of the perspectives of what happens, of how policy affects immigration. Sure. I want to wrap up by saying just two more things. One, that day we were supposed to meet with Border Patrol, and maybe ICE. We were supposed to meet with Customs and Border Patrol that day, not ICE. And they had to cancel their appointment with us because of the government shutdown. So we weren't able to meet with people who were going to maybe fill in a different part of the story too, or tell us their experience through all of this. And then that night we met with pastors in the area from our denomination. So I invited John Heron, who's the pastor at McAllen First UMC, and he came out to dinner with our group. And there's some other pastors from the area, and we had dinner at a really nice restaurant in McAllen by a chef that beat Bobby Flay at on a TV show or something, right?
Wow.
And so there was just a sharp degree of contrast. Dean, do you mind if I tell people what it was like to cross the border back over to the United States?
Sure. Okay. I think that's part of it, yeah.
Yeah, so let's close this out by that story. We came over, we left the camps. They drove us back to the same kind of plaza that we entered in. We walked up a ramp to cross over a bridge that was elevated, and going out of Mexico, you had to pay a quarter. I think you might have to pay coming into the United States too, but you pay a little bit of money. Yeah, you pay a little bit of money to use the bridge. It's like a toll bridge, basically, right? So you pay a little money, you walk across, and then you go through, customs or whatever in the United States. Interesting things that we saw, though. It's the same bridge, a lot of the same perspectives, but we were crossing at the end of the school day, and so there were a lot of students. Hundreds of students,
right?
At least 100 students crossing the bridge to go back into Reynosa because they were done with school for the day. They had come to the United States for school that day. They were going back to Reynosa in the evening, and that affects the way that they can do school there and how often it affects attendance rates at school and students' ability to participate in after-school activities. But the students are largely American citizens, I believe. That's what I was told, is that they are largely American citizens coming to the United States for school, but they're living in Mexico maybe with a relative, or maybe their parent isn't a citizen.
That's why.
Or, maybe it's cheaper to live over there. There's different reasons they might live across the border. But 100 kids or more coming across the border every day to go to school. On our way across the border, it was largely uneventful. We had one person in our group in the customs agent said, ask them, "Are you an American citizen?" And he just got flustered. He's an American citizen, has been his whole life, born in Chicago, right?
Right.
And when you get flustered, then they start asking more questions. And eventually the agent looks around and says, "Oh, are you all of you together?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then I think that eased the tension a little bit. Right. But for me, like, I showed him my passport, told him that I had been to visit this migrant camp, because that's what they told us to tell as we crossed the border. Mm-hmm. And because the agents would be familiar with that, because a lot of people had been crossing to visit these places. And then I put my backpack in a scanner, got my backpack back, and we went and waited outside for everyone else to finish coming through after the little moment of confusion. And there was no long line this time, even to come across. There was a long line of traffic, people in cars waiting to cross the border, to go back into the United States at this point. But it was just a really interesting and eventful day. Then we went and had our fancy dinner.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. It's just amazing that what you're allowed to do in this way, and what other people are not allowed to do. Mm-hmm. So
there's a huge contrast there.
Yes. So good place to stop. Great information. You're a good storyteller yourself.
Well, thank you.
So
we're going to close in prayer today.
Yes.
Let's close in prayer. God, we pray for people who are in places of transition. Sometimes those transitions are represented in migration from one place to another, seeking a better life. We pray for people who are in transitions like retirement, navigating changes in their lives. We pray for people who are in charge of borders and policies. It is a work that is difficult, where it feels like there is not necessarily any right answer. And so we pray for wisdom and your guidance for those who are making the choices and the decisions that affect our experience of our home country and people's access to it. And so, God, be our leader of leaders. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
For Nick Robinson, I'm Dean O'Neill, and you've been on the ground at the border.